Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. So, we're talking community ecology here. And last time we were doing notes, we discussed that there really are three major interactions that occur between different species in a community. And that was the competition that we talked about last time, the predation we're going to talk about today, and the symbiosis that we'll get to shortly. So, when we talk about predation, this is something most of you are probably relatively familiar with. This is occurring when one organism captures and eats another. So, our predators are the ones who do the attacking, like our snake here in the picture, and the prey species is the one that is being fed upon. So, if we were to look at sort of benefit versus costs here, predators are clearly benefiting from this relationship while the prey are, well, dead. So, certainly being harmed. And it's interesting to look at predation from an evolutionary standpoint because it is very much the classic example of coevolution. As those predators feed on their prey species, they're going to really ultimately be picking out the weakest links. And so that means that they are forcing the evolution of that prey. That being said, as the prey evolve to better outmaneuver their predators, those predators have to evolve right along with them. And so that predator species, those who aren't so good at getting their prey anymore, are going to be the ones who end up dying out, leaving the stronger or faster or more clever, whatever the case might be, a better adapted predator as a result. So when we look at those adaptations, these are some of the common ones that we see if we just talk about predator versus prey in general. Are there certainly very specific ones we can talk about? Will we talk about very specific predator and prey relationships? Absolutely. But in general, these are some of the common ones that we see across most predator and prey species. So when we look at predators, right, they tend to be fast in terms of speed, they're agile, they're capable of maneuvering their bodies around. A lot of them will have camouflage coloring so that their prey can't see them coming. Quite a few of them work in packs. Wolves are a great example of that, lions as well. And so they'll sort of help each other out. They tend to have very acute senses, whether it be sight or smell or hearing or some combination thereof. A lot of them that you're probably thinking of off the top of your head have things like claws or sharp teeth, fangs, stingers, that kind of thing. Um, and a lot of them will have resistance to defensive chemicals. So a lot of prey species will produce poisonous chemicals or will be able to tolerate high levels of certain chemicals from their food sources that when eaten, they end up being poisonous or at least make their predators ill. Great example of that is the monarch butterfly. So they will eat the milkweed, which is not toxic to them, but a compound from that milkweed plant will build up in their body so that when birds come and eat them, it generally doesn't kill the bird. However, it will make the bird violently ill. And so couple that with this idea of warning coloration that, right, there are these bright orange and black uh, wings that the birds will associate that ill feeling with that coloration pattern, and as a result, not go after any sort of bug that has that same coloration pattern. Interesting idea to that is that there are a lot of species of butterflies and moths that have evolved to mimic that coloration. So they themselves are not poisonous, but they have evolved a very similar coloration pattern to those monarchs. And so birds just associate that ill feeling after coming in contact with a monarch with any orange and black coloring and will stay away from all species that look similar. Other other prey adaptations, camouflage coloring as well. So just like those predators are trying to be concealed in their environment from their prey, the prey are doing the exact same thing. Prey species not only uh, will retreat and flee, but that also means they have to be fast and agile as well to try and outpace and outrun their predators if they're being chased. We talked about the warning coloration and the mimicry with the butterflies, the poisonous chemicals as well. And we often forget that plants are prey species. And so a lot of them will have spines and thorns, along with a lot of the other reptiles, things like that, that will also have those sorts of adaptations as well. So let's talk about those plants for a moment, because a lot of people in general, students, will forget that plants are living. And so, technically speaking, a herbivore, right, a plant eater coming in and eating those plants, that is a predator-prey relationship. And so those plants have evolved a lot of really interesting adaptations because they can't get up and run. That's not an option for them. So things like thorns and spines and prickles, right? Anything that you've ever touched that has any sort of sharp edges to it, right? It hurts. Well, they've evolved that to be not particularly palatable. You certainly don't love it in your fingers, and imagine being an animal coming along and trying to eat that, and now it's in your mouth. That's incredibly discomforting. Um, Secondary compounds, so they will have defensive chemicals that are toxic to other organisms that try to eat them. And again, it can be to a level where it will actually kill you, or it can just be to a level that will make that predator ill, that herbivore ill, to not want to eat them anymore. Now, certainly herbivores have overcome plant defenses, right? Again, just like any other predator-prey relationship, coevolution is happening here. So, for example, certain larval stages of herbivorous insects, caterpillars, and things like that, may actually not be affected by those toxic defense chemicals. Instead, they are able to eat them, and in a lot of cases, like that monarch butterfly, they are able to eat that milkweed and in that larval caterpillar stage, and then will actually sort of bioaccumulate that compound in their body. So when they become a butterfly and are able to fly away, getting eaten by another predator up the food chain provides them some additional defense. So it's an interesting whole other world when you want to talk about plant defenses. I'm going to kind of leave it here, but if it's something you're interested in digging into, go Google some stuff because it's pretty cool.
This is a tomato plant, and this is an aphid slowly killing the tomato plant by sucking the juice out of its leaves. The tomato is putting up a fight, using both physical and chemical defenses to repel the attacking insects. But that's not all. The tomato is also releasing compounds that signal nearby tomato plants to release their own insect repellent. Plants are constantly under attack. They face threats ranging from microscopic fungi and bacteria, small herbivores like aphids, caterpillars, and grasshoppers, up to large herbivores like tortoises, koalas, and elephants. All are looking to devour plants to access the plentiful nutrients and water in their leaves, stems, fruits, and seeds. But plants are ready with a whole series of internal and external defenses that make them a much less appealing meal, or even a deadly one. Plants' defenses start at their surface. The bark covering tree trunks is full of lignin, a rigid web of compounds that's tough to chew and highly impermeable to pathogens. Leaves are protected by a waxy cuticle that deters insects and microbes. Some plants go a step further with painful structures to warn would-be predators. Thorns, spines, and prickles discourage bigger herbivores. To deal with smaller pests, some plants' leaves have sharp, hair-like structures called trichomes. The kidney bean plant sports tiny hooks to stab the feet of bedbugs and other insects. In some species, trichomes also dispense chemical irritants. Stinging nettles release a mixture of histamine and other toxins that cause pain and inflammation when touched. For other plant species, the pain comes after an herbivore's first bite. Spinach, kiwi fruit, pineapple, fuchsia, and rhubarb all produce microscopic needle-shaped crystals called rhaphides. They can cause tiny wounds in the inside of animals' mouths, which create entry points for toxins. The mimosa plant has a strategy designed to prevent herbivores from taking a bite at all. Specialized mechanoreceptor cells detect touch and shoot an electrical signal through the leaflet to its base, causing cells there to release charged particles. The buildup of charge draws water out of these cells, and they shrivel, pulling the leaflet closed. The folding movement scares insects away, and the shrunken leaves look less appealing to larger animals. If these external defenses are breached, the plant immune system springs into action. Plants don't have a separate immune system like animals. Instead, every cell has the ability to detect and defend against invaders. Specialized receptors can recognize molecules that signal the presence of dangerous microbes or insects. In response, the immune system initiates a battery of defensive maneuvers. To prevent more pathogens from making their way inside, the waxy cuticle thickens and cell walls get stronger. Guard cells seal up pores in the leaves. And if microbes are devouring one section of the plant, those cells can self-destruct to quarantine the infection. Compounds toxic to microbes and insects are also produced, often tailor-made for a specific threat. Many of the plant molecules that humans have adopted as drugs, medicines, and seasonings evolved as part of plants' immune systems because they're antimicrobial or insecticidal. An area of a plant under attack can alert other regions using hormones, airborne compounds, or even electrical signals. When other parts of the plant detect these signals, they ramp up production of defensive compounds. And for some species, like tomatoes, this early warning system also alerts their neighbors. Some plants can even recruit allies to adopt a strong offense against their would-be attackers. Cotton plants under siege by caterpillars release a specific cocktail of 10 to 12 chemicals into the air. This mixture attracts parasitic wasps that lay eggs inside the caterpillars. Plants may not be able to flee the scene of an attack or fight off predators with teeth and claws, but with sturdy armor, a well-stocked chemical arsenal, a neighborhood watch, and cross-species alliances, a plant isn't always an easy meal.
So let's sort of tie this idea of predation and competition together. So we talk predation, right? Predator-prey relationships. Predators are benefiting, prey are clearly being harmed. The competition we talked about is just two species fighting over the same limited resource, and both species are going to be harmed by that competition and relationship because it's going to cost them energy and sometimes actually cost them their lives in order to get that resource. So when we sort of tie this together, that predator really is helping to control the population of the prey species so that we keep the level of prey within a population at a level that is sustainable. Without those predators, those prey species may completely outcompete each other or outcompete other prey species that are on sort of a similar level in the food chain. And as a result, if we end up doing that and they're sort of outcompeting those other species, extinction is occurring, we're reducing the overall biodiversity of an area. And remember, we mentioned that biodiversity a little bit in that first set of notes. That biodiversity is just looking at the different types of organisms and how many organisms there are, how many species there are in an area. And the more biodiverse a ecosystem, the more stable it tends to be. So by reducing that biodiversity, we are reducing the stability of that ecosystem. So by reducing the competition from predation, we are actually increasing the biodiversity, increasing the stability. And so kind of that idea of everybody has a role and everybody's important is very, very true when we talk about the stability of ecosystems and stability of food chains. So, an interesting thing that can come up with the species that are competing or predating in a particular ecosystem is this idea of keystone species. And they do a really great job of building up biodiversity in a particular ecosystem based on the niche that they fill. So when we talk about a keystone species, these are species that have some unusually large effect on their ecosystems, very much disproportionately influencing the structure and the both abiotic and biotic factors that are existing in their surrounding area. And a great example of that are these beavers. So they build these dams and they're doing it for themselves. They're doing this in a way to create a habitat, create a shelter for themselves. But by doing that, they're backing up the water, creating these wetland ecosystems. And so those ecosystems end up having an increase in fish populations, which brings in an increase in waterfowl like ducks to eat those fish and other types of debris and organisms that might be in this pond that gets built behind that dam, which increases nesting sites for birds. And so by having that beaver dam in place and backing up that water and creating this ecosystem that wouldn't necessarily be in place, at least not to this level normally, we're greatly increasing the stability of this ecosystem as well as just the diversity of different life that can exist there. You remove the beaver dam, the water all floods away, and it's not able to sustain the type of organisms, or at least not to the level that we're seeing here in these types of communities, which is really kind of
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years. That the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up and built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds, of migratory birds, started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes And as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed, more pools formed, more riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.